Ham or cheese? Ham or cheese?
In a world where insanity reigns supreme and safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, it's comforting to know an ancient, fat, long-haired, bearded reprobate has your mind in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, and despite every attempt by the SHR Media Network to revoke his shameless contract, we return to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon.
You're listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
Tomo, you magnificent bastard, I read your book. I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch!
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain. Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain.
No, not yet. Don't pass out on me yet. Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon Radio Show. Tonight, it is April the 22nd, the year of our Lord, 2021. Folks, you're in the saloon, always spelled with a K, a mere 2 miles east of the locus of evil on the entire left coast, the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, the Capitol building in downtown Sacramento, 10th and L Streets, and at the end of the show when I exit, the plush, resplendent, sumptuous, and palatial SHR Media Studios, I'll be smelling the odoriferous stench of... And now Berkeley Books. Terrence McCAULEY, how are you, sir, this late evening?
I am doing just fine, my friend. How are you?
Excelente. That's Spanish for excellent. Now, I again need what? I again need to remind everyone that it's 8:06 right now on the far left coast. That means it's 11:06 where Terrence is in the state of New York right now. So, folks, I spoke to, boy, this is going to go back. This is going to date. I don't know if even you remember this, Terrence McCAULEY. I spoke first to Terrence on August 9th of 2017. Then on December of 2017, and that was following the release of his book, A Murder of Crows. Then August of 2018, then 2 more times on January 16th of 2020, and then September 3rd of 2020, and I probably forgot some times in between in 2019, so that's like 6 or 7 times right now.
Right.
So since then, Terrence, other things have changed. You have written a veritable ass load. Folks, if you're watching on YouTube right now, do you see my cupped hands? That is the illustrative indicator of an ass load. So if you can fit it in there, that's the BZ equivalent of an ass load. So you can immure that. You can take a photo of this. If you're watching on your phone, do the screen capture thing, because that's the definition of an ass load. Just a little important safety tip from me to you. Having said that, however, you've been on a whole bunch of times, and I really appreciate it that you continue to come on, because number one, I really enjoy your books. I'll get into that in a moment, but I just happen to think you're a really, as I wrote in promos today, I happen to think that you're a really good soul.
Thank you, Paul.
You're a good person, and that you write, you're the kind of guy, and if I ever do this, if I ever get up into the Northeast or New York, you're the kind of dude where I'd like to sit down in a bar somewhere and have a beer, and I bet we could talk some real shit. I bet we could go over all kinds of crazy wackiness that has occurred in our lives. And I don't say that lightly. There aren't that many people that I would be willing, because generally I hate people, that I would be willing to sit down and spend my time with. And so the reason I have you on is because you're a good dude and you write great books. Now,
thank you, pal. I appreciate it.
You have had a bunch of kudos to you. And since, we spoke late 2020, and it's already April of this year, almost May. And things have changed for you, and things have changed for me. I got rated number 18 in the top 80 late-night talk show podcasts that you have to follow in 2021. So
congratulations, by the way. I congratulated you in private and congratulated you in public.
You did, and I'm really honored about that. So the audience is explosioning. I'm not sure what language that is. Perhaps Zephronese, because the people from Zephron come and visit every once in a while. In any event, since then, we've gotten to know Terrence in a bit of his background, your history, your being a proud native of the Bronx in New York City. And I've never been to New York, Terrence. The closest I got to New York was, when I worked for the feds. So other than that, I've never been to New York. So when people say they're from the Bronx, what does that mean, Terrence McCAULEY, to people that have never been there or don't know what that means?
Right. It means a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. I was born in 1974 when the Bronx was infamously burning during the World Series. And to give people a little bit of perspective, I was born in a hospital about 60 city blocks north of Yankee Stadium. And probably about 50 blocks north. And I lived there my whole life until I was about 27 or 28. So I walked to school my entire life, like a lot of people do in the suburbs. But for me, it was in the city, and it was a unique environment because people figure, you're from the city, you're a white guy, so you grew up in an affluent neighborhood. Well, that wasn't the case with me. I grew up in a neighborhood full of people from elsewhere or people of color. And so technically me and my other friends were in the minority. And that gives somebody a different perspective on life. And it gave me a sense of what other people go through every day, the kind of struggles they face, because it had nothing to do with race or religion, but it had everything to do with coming from the same economic background, middle class, lower middle class. And to be from the Bronx, my area of the Bronx anyway, that's where I learned how important a good day's work was, how to treat people with respect, and how to make sure you treat others as you would like to be treated, which isn't really revolutionary. It's just common decency, in my opinion. But these days, it seems like it's a gift people have to learn. That's a little ridiculous to me.
That could be a 28-hour story for another day if we were to go there and address all of that GURP. For whatever reason, people seem to think that when you are in New York or come from New York, you're living in one of those 75 floors, really great, cool buildings right across from Central Park, because that's what everybody sees on TV, and apparently that ain't true. So thanks for updating it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody sees a Woody Allen movie and they think, oh, that's the way New Yorkers are. That's not the way New York is. It's not the way it is for 90% of the people, and it wasn't like that in the 1970s when he made a lot of those movies. He shows his stuff is beautiful. You know, if you look at his movies, not him personally, but if you look at his movies, you'll see a certain type and a certain socioeconomic background. Not to get too nerdy about it, but it's usually fairly wealthy, well-educated white people all in the same part of the city. And where I grew up, which is in the borough north of Manhattan, it was a completely different upbringing. So, you know, I understand why people have a certain idea of what it is like to be a New Yorker, but it's like anything else. When you dig a little bit below the surface, it's not always the same.
We'll get back to New York. And having grown up in New York plays a fairly major role, actually, as sort of a personality in a good deal of your books, because that's what you know.
Yeah, that's what I know, and I also use a lot of what I love and what I love about New York in my books. As you've known, I've written books that were set in 1930s New York, which combines my love of history and my love of the city and my love of politics. And, you know, back before politics was a contact sport, when it was about more than just insulting people, and it was about actually a common good and a common order that benefited as many people as possible. I wrote about Tammany Hall, which was the most corrupt political organization in the history of the United States. But I wrote about it because I was able to do so in a historic context that let me write about the history and of the city I love, and about a genre I happen to like, which is crime fiction. So, and then in my later thrillers, I would like Sympathy for the Devil and the University series. I was able to talk about modern day New York and a lot of my experiences in there. So New York and settings in general are often the hidden character in a lot of my work.
When you mentioned that, and characters and New York and authors, for whatever reason, my fetid little curled brain immediately moved over to James Ellroy, the crime author there, who he is. I don't know if you've ever read any James Ellroy.
Oh God, yeah, I've read a lot.
People tend to either really love him or hate him because of his style. But he really has a love-hate relationship with Los Angeles, and partly I believe that's because, and folks, I recommend, number one, obviously I recommend that you get Terrence McCauley's books. Duh, that's why we're here tonight. But I also recommend that you at least maybe take a peek at a James Ellroy book, and you'll either be hooked or you'll go, not my cup of tea, dude. Not my cup of tea. His earlier stuff, when he's writing about the LAPD from the 60s and the 70s, not so bad. But through a lot of his other books, he drags the LAPD through the coals. And what a lot of people don't know is his mother was killed in Los Angeles. She was a prostitute. And he still, to this day, is trying to investigate and discover the killer of his mother. So it's a unique relationship between locales and authors. Okay, back to Terrence McCauley. Get out of my brain, folks. So, Terrence, you spent the first 27 years of your life in the Bronx. This is from memory. Let's see if I can pull it out of the rat hole. You graduated from Fordham, and the way that I remember that is Vince Lombardi went there on his football scholarship.
Yep.
You wanted to be an FBI profiler, and then you changed your major. You were a poli-sci major. I don't think I ever asked you this before. Maybe I did. I'll ask it again just because I frequently do have no memory. Why were you interested in becoming an FBI profiler?
Sure, because it was back in the 90s. It was 1992 when I graduated high school, and of course, Silence of the Lambs was huge. And that was at a time when profiling was supposedly a brand new science that had been going on for a while. But after that great movie came out, it was something that I decided that I wanted to do. I had always wanted to have a career in law enforcement, and my father forbade it. All of his cop friends forbade it. I had a lot of them talk me out of it. I know. And it wasn't because my father was anti-cop. My father was anti-me being a cop, and that was because he didn't think I had the temperament for it. And which is the same reason why he didn't want me to go into the military, because he didn't think I would do well in that environment. So it had nothing. My father was somewhere between, on the political spectrum, he was somewhere between John Wayne and Genghis Khan. So it wasn't coming from, it was not coming from a place of being anti-Leo. It was actually just knowing his son and knowing what his son's propensities were. So I figured at that point, since they didn't want me to be a Marine and they didn't want me to be a police officer, maybe an FBI profiler would be a good idea. So I started, when I applied for colleges, I put down that I wanted to major in psychology or psychiatry. But then once I got to college, I realized that in order to do anything with sciences, you have to do something with labs, and I wasn't very good with labs, and I also didn't really want to deal with crazy people. So I figured, well, let me cut the difference and get involved in political science.
Okay.
So so anyway, I wound up dealing with psychopaths, but in a different profession entirely. So I graduated in '96, and then I was a government employee at various public benefit corporations for the next 25 years or so. So I got my fix of psychopaths and nut jobs and peeking behind the curtain at the emperor with no clothes.
Well, one way or the other, you get a little bit too involved in other people's minds. I've been described by other people as not necessarily being Genghis Khan, but just a hair to the right of Vlad the Impaler. So we'll move on from that. As you mentioned before, you had the luxury of being able to walk to school. You've been working in government most of your life. You were a political, and I'm pulling this again out of the brain. Right. You were a political junkie in 1984. You were like 9 or 10 or something like that. Yep. When the conventions were starting. And you got involved in, I think the campaign, or you were interested in Walter Mondale's campaign right around in then?
No, it was back in '84. I was 10 years old, and
okay.
the Daily News here in New York had a cartoonist who did a layout of all of the convention floors, and he did it for the Republicans, and he did it for the Democrats, and they had the schedule on there. And for some reason, I liked sports, but I latched on to these conventions like you wouldn't believe, and I was sitting there like a little geek watching Channel 13. Because we didn't have cable in my area of the Bronx at that point. And I was checking off events as they happened. And truth be told, back then, I wound up falling in love with Reagan because I saw the It's Morning Again in America commercial.
Right.
When I was 10 years old, and when, even if you look at that commercial today, all these years later, if you're 10 years old, that's the one that's going to resonate rather than a picture of Walter Mondale or, Dukakis in a tank. That kind of patriotic imagery is going to appeal to a 10-year-old like me, and still does in many ways. So that's when my love of politics picked up, and rather than being one party or the other, I loved the game itself. And then as I grew older, I wound up leaning far more to the right than most people in New York do.
God, Dukakis in the tank. What a visual. As soon as you
and he
said
had a
that,
right to be there too. Remember, he had a right to be there. I think he was the tank commander in the Army.
I think that was the connection to that, and he got ridiculed for that. I don't know. I kind of thought it was pretty cool. Speaking of Walter Mondale, he passed away like 3 days ago at the age of 93 in his sleep. He was Jimmy Carter's vice president. And Reagan came in 80, and then he ran against Reagan in 1984. Yep. So, and if I go, I want to pass away in my sleep. There's no doubt about that. Where I don't want to go, because I've seen my grandmother there, and my dad there 5 times, is a nursing facility. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. Terrence McCauley, you also have a love of, because when I do promo stuff for you on the social media that I have, I love the pictures that you have of cigars. You're a devotee of cigars as well as movies. As a matter of fact, I meant to ask you, the photograph that you have holding a cigar and you're wearing a Panama hat, is that in a large walk-in humidor?
Yes, it was in a humidor. It was taken by a good friend of mine, Mark Kraniak, here he lives in New Jersey, but it was taken in a place that just closed, unfortunately, the Nat Sherman Townhouse on 42nd Street, right off Fifth Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. And I was a member there, and that area that you see is where the lockers, where members used to have their names on the doors, and they could put their cigars in there, and it was a walk-in humidor. And unfortunately, they've since closed in the past 6 months, but it's a shame because it was a throwback. It was, and it was a great place. I met a lot of really wonderful friends there, and I miss them and I miss the place. But that's where the picture was taken.
And I bet it really smelled good too.
It did, depending on who was in there and what they were smoking. Yeah, I mean, they always had a really good selection of stuff. They were always bringing new things in. And that's what being a cigar smoker is all about. It's about relaxing, cigar aficionado. I just love doing it, and it helps me to relax. It helps me in my writing, and I've met a lot of really great people by doing it.
I think it's a wonderful idea. Darn me for not mentioning this before. Welcome to Ralph Chittum's in Facebook chat. The rest of you people that are in Facebook chat, and I can see there's a bunch of you for whatever reason in Facebook. I only see like a name. So if I don't mention your name in Facebook, it's because I can't see you. So I apologize for that. In the SHR Media chat, we got Mike and the Alaskan, Leslie Holker, and 2 viewers who will not be unmasked because I don't do that here. One of the things that I really enjoy with you is you write in multiple genres. One of the dudes that did that or does that is a guy named Richard Matheson. He worked in science fiction, horror, fantasy. He wrote I Am Legend in 1954. I think they made the Omega Man out of that. And
the Omega Man, yeah, and then they did a couple of remakes on it. The Will Smith one was actually, it's called I Am Legend, but that one was closer to another movie that Harry Belafonte did that was good too, but they borrowed a lot more from that than he did from the books. And Matheson also wrote Westerns.
Yes. And people from this dates me. If anybody enjoyed Twilight Zone, he also wrote the script for the episode with William Shatner, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Right.
That was way cool. And he wrote the script for Steven Spielberg's first movie in 1971, Duel.
Right.
And
with Dennis, I forget the guy's name.
Yeah, I was going to say Dennis Hopper, but you're right. Dennis, and I'll get back to that as soon as my
The guy who played McLeod.
Yes!
I don't remember.
I don't remember his last name either. Okay, you and I are both there. And you also dug Matthew Riley because he writes like that, and so I started reading Matthew Riley. Stephen King does that, Robert Silverberg, Dan Simmons, Ian Fleming. Wow. James Bond, and also wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Wow. Roald Dahl. This again is dating me a whole bunch. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and also wrote this great book that anybody can order in Kindle immediately, My Uncle Oswald, the Greatest Fornicator of All Time. I'm not making that up. Terrence McCauley, I don't think I've asked you this any time before. We got about a minute before the bottom of the hour break. What was your very first published piece?
Oh.
Where was it published, and how did it make you feel to see print?
Wow, yeah, it's funny that you said that, because as I'm talking to you, I look on my shelf, and it was a local publication up here in Dutchess County, and it was one that was put together. Its name is Edna, and even though it was a small publication, nobody saw it. I didn't get paid for it, but it was a wonderful accomplishment at that point, and it fed my need to keep writing and keep going.
I think that's a wonderful thing. That is just way cool. A few names actually appeared on Facebook right now, so I can say hi to Jan McKillop, and I can say hi to Rita McCauley. Huh. So welcome to everybody. We're going to take a brief break and be right back after this with Terrence McCauley.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, are you guys listening? This is Shannon from Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media. I know you've been wondering where we are and what's been going on. Well, folks, that's right. We're back. So please join us 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday on SHR Media, on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, and Facebook Live at 11 a.m. on Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM at Facebook. You don't want to miss a minute. We've got lots of guests, lots of segments, and lots of interesting things. And let's face it, there's nowhere for you to go, so you might as well tune in. Again, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. We're back live on the air on SHR Media, 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday, audio and Facebook Live, audio and video. Yes, we are going to do video. Facebook Live, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Hope to see you soon.
Want to make an immediate difference in the life of a critically ill child? You have the ability to do that right now. Make a donation to Dream Makers for Life, the organization that restores dreams to seriously ill children and their families. You can sponsor a dream pack for a child, which contains a clear PVC backpack, a dry erase board adventure coloring book, a journal, and dry erase markers to inspire a critically ill child to envision a future adventure and hope. Want to become a dream maker for life yourself? Go to dreamforlife.org. That's dreamforlife.org. Help a child. Help a family. There is always hope.
Unleashed Jeremy Hansen, the most explosive pro-American podcast on the planet. Pro-MAGA, pro-Trump, pro-conservative. Come join the resistance. Fight for what really matters in America. 5 p.m. Central on UJHLive.com, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Pandora, or MAGAbook.com. Come join the resistance and fight for America. Unleashed Jeremy Hansen.
Do you value yourself, your family, your friends? Want to know more about how to survive, thrive, and stay alive in these dynamic times? Listen to Around the Campfire with Kate, Thursday nights and Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central, only on PSN TV. That's Around the Campfire with Kate. News that nobody in the MSM wants to report. Remember, train hard, train smart to survive, thrive, and stay alive.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we are back. We're here tonight with Terrence McCAULEY, author Terrence McCAULEY, who I have had on the show any number of times. Great dude, great soul, as I write. And as he writes thrillers and about crime and also about westerns. We're going to start getting into specifically the books that he writes. Thanks to Leslie for being in chat, the Alaskan, Sergeant Booker, Mike, 2 viewers that are in chat, Jan McKillop, Rita McCauley, and Ralph Chittams. To everybody that's watching in chat right now in both areas, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. The only thing I don't monitor is YouTube because I've only got 2 arms and I don't use them very effectively, or so people keep telling me. Terrence McCAULEY, thank you for being here again tonight. You've got 4 books out involving the university that's published by Paulus Books, linked to your protagonist, James Hicks, a thriller series of novels. And those are in order, and this is how I recommend you read them, although, I don't know, are those kind of standalone? Can they read those books in a standalone fashion, Terrence McCAULEY? Is that something you would recommend?
Sure, people can, but I always write with a series in mind in most cases, so I would always say try to read them in order, and that order would be Sympathy for the Devil, A Murder of Crows, and A Conspiracy of Ravens. There's a prequel there called The Fairfax Incident, which I know you've read as well.
Yes. So, folks, for those of you just tuned in, I'm listening to, well, of course I'm listening to, but I'm talking to Terrence McCAULEY. He wrote in his university series of thriller books, Sympathy for the Devil, A Murder of Crows, A Conspiracy of Ravens, The Fairfax Incident, which kind of goes back into the history of the university. And Terrence McCAULEY, you also have your New York crime series, and I had to write this all down because I think I said at the beginning, you have 16 books out. Is that close? Is that accurate?
Well, with my name on it, yeah, I've gotten about 23, 24 done.
I knew I was wrong.
That are not out. Some of them aren't out yet, and some of them are ghostwritten, so they don't have my name on them. But yeah, they were. I've been pretty busy over the last 2 or 3 years.
Oh, don't think that we're not going to get to that. Okay. Oh yeah, because that's right in the old brain here. You've got the New York crime series. There, let's see, I bought this, The Devil Dogs of Bellawood, Fight Card, Against the Ropes, Prohibition, Slow Burn. Do you put the Fairfax Incident in either your thriller area or in the New York area? Because I did.
Sure, I would put that in the New York area, in the crime noir books that you just mentioned, even though it does serve as a precursor to the Ultimate University series that happened decades later in the modern day.
Okay. I recommend Terrence's books these days, especially these days, if for no other reason than our brains, before they burst, need a diversion to give ourselves a break from all the madness. And I said it on, and anytime I talk to you, I'm going to continue to say this. I think it's really exciting to watch you, for me as a reader, to watch you as an author really explodes. And I've said it before, each book you write just keeps getting better. And I find that fascinating because I started at the start, and now 22 books later, it's fascinating to me to watch your skills, your writing chops command. You stopped being a writer long ago, and you are clearly an author, and it's been a really great journey. Before I forget, and I should have mentioned this up front, find Terrence at his website, .com, terrence-mccauley.squarespace.com. And you can find his bio there, everything. And he's got a Twitter page, too. And he's also on Facebook. I'm going to have to jump ahead a little bit. Let's go to your Westerns. You first started writing Westerns with your Sheriff Aaron Mackey series. And there are 3 people in here in the chat room, especially Leslie. I can remember Leslie saying that she went out and bought your books because she listened to a couple of prior shows with you. But you have 4 books now in the Sheriff Aaron Mackey series published by Pinnacle, where the Dark Territory, Get Out of Town, I like that one, Get Out of Town, and The Dark Sunrise. So tell us a little bit, if you will, Terrence McCAULEY, about your protagonist there, Sheriff Aaron Mackey.
Sure. It's been a great journey for me to be able to write about a genre that I love so much. And as you said earlier, I grew up in the Bronx, but I also grew up as a classic movie lover because we didn't have cable. And I used to watch with my family Channel 13, which is a PBS station here, on Saturday nights. And they used to show a lot of Westerns and a lot of classic movies. So I used to watch some of the classic Westerns like The Searchers and Red River and Gunfight at the OK Corral with my dad. Oh, yeah. And as I got older, I used to love history. So I said, you know what? I love Westerns. I love history. Let me take a look at what the history of the Old West really was like. And completely blew my mind because all I knew of it was when we finally did get cable, watching the old reruns of Gunsmoke and Maverick and other shows that were perfectly fine. But as I read about the history of the Western explorers and shooting Indians and bank robberies, that stuff didn't happen a lot back then because everybody was packing. And if you stole from a bank, you were stealing some guy's hard-earned money, and they were going to be damned if they were just going to let you ride out of town without shooting you full of holes. So I wanted to tell something that was set in the Old West that people could relate to, but that was also factually accurate, because I didn't want to write a story where someone was going to pop up and say, aha, you got this wrong, or you got that wrong, or that never happened. Instead, I dwelt on facts, and I wasn't writing a history book, but I did want to write fiction that was rooted in something that had happened. And so that's where the Bullets Fly was born. It was about Aaron Mackey, who is a former unjustly disgraced U.S. cavalry officer who was asked to leave the Army. And he and his sergeant, a former Buffalo soldier named Billy Sunday, and him and his best friend, returned to Dover Station, where they are elected sheriff and deputy sheriff of a fictional town in Montana, Dover Station, Montana. And the first book kind of told itself. I wound up wanting to show how tough Mackey was, but I didn't want to do it the stereotypical way, like you might see with the shootout at high noon on Main Street, with another thing that didn't happen. But instead, I used real-world, relatable events where his town is threatened by outsiders who are looking to do nothing but pillage and rape and burn. He defends the town against that, and then once they break off the attack, Mackey says, you might be done with it, but I'm not. And then he pursues them till the ends of the earth until he ultimately catches them. I thought that was a story that people could relate to, and it was definitely a story I enjoyed telling, and it opened up a whole universe of other books that I'm now 4 books into right now.
Folks, we're talking to Terrence McCAULEY. He's a thriller author, crime author, and Westerns most recently. Okay, Terrence, tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems that once you started to write, you became a writing machine. You seem to have grabbed from wherever, I don't know, some kind of massive inspiration, and you just took off. So how was it that writing Westerns clearly have tickled your pickle? What does it with Westerns for you?
Well, what it was I was writing, and then I would need a break from those. So I wrote Where the Bullets Fly, actually, I wrote about 10 years ago, but I didn't even have an agent. I hadn't been published at that point, and it sat on my hard drive for a long time until I found my agent, my agent and I sold Sympathy for the Devil and Prohibition and Slow Burn to the same publisher. And he said, what else do you got? And I said, well, I got a Western, but nobody wants that. He said, are you kidding me? I've got a publisher that's dying for Westerns. So that's where The Bullets Fly was born. Then, as I was writing, I finished writing A Murder of Prose, and I needed to do something else other than spy novels. So the publisher of Where the Bullets Fly said, well, do you have a sequel in mind for it? So they told me, put it on a train, or have a train involved in it somehow. And that's where Dark Territory was born. So then I wound up going back and forth between writing thrillers and writing a Western. And I've been doing that ever since. And then after the Mackey series is now at number 4, then I've gotten into the Ralph Compton series after that.
I have to tell you this, and again, you correct me if I'm wrong, Terrence McCauley. Terrence is writing for Ralph Compton. So Ralph Compton was this prolific Western author. The dude was 6'8". He passed away in 1998 at the age of 64. He wrote, to my best guesstimate, and I couldn't find anybody that could tell me for sure. As far as I could tell, he wrote between 56 and 89 books, depending on which website you go to.
Yep.
And so then Berkeley comes and taps you on the shoulder to write books under the name of Ralph Compton, who was a huge, literally, physically, and prolifically Western author. To me, that seems like it's an incredible honor that an author like yourself who begin in the Western genre, you were tapped to help out with a widely read author like Ralph Compton. That's how I would interpret that. Am I right or wrong in that? I think it's an incredible honor.
I took it as an incredible honor myself. I was floored when they wanted me to do it, and I was, again, incredibly honored that they thought of me for it. And I had a lot of fun writing them. It's funny because people say, it's got Ralph Compton's name on it, it's got my name right underneath it. But the ironic part of it is I love writing series. I love telling a series story. I find it rewarding in its own right because as I build out a universe, as I build out a world, I'm able to take people from different books and plop them in there or say, oh, they're going to work great in the future book. With the Ralph Compton books, it doesn't work that way. Every single one of them is a standalone novel. The 3 books are part of specific series, like they have the Trail Drive series, they have the Gunfighter series, and then they have the Sundown Riders series. And none of them can be related. They don't encourage people to continue those characters in future books, even if you write for the Compton brand again. So for me, it was a unique challenge in that I had to come up with 3 individual stories that were standalone, had to have a beginning, middle, and end, all compartmentalized within themselves. And that was something I wasn't necessarily used to, even though all my books are standalones. It was a unique challenge to have to reinvent the wheel, to borrow a tired phrase, 3 different times, but it ultimately made me, in my opinion, a much stronger writer.
Folks, we're talking to Terrence McCauley. The books that he's talking about, the first one that he wrote is called The Kelly Trail. That's in the Trail Drive series. The second one, and I read I read The Kelly Trail. That has to be one of the most unusual protagonists that I've read in a long time. I'm not going to spoil the plot or why he's so unusual, but that just really engaged me. And the dealio with his sons. Again, I'm not going to provide any spoilers. The second book is called Ride the Hammer Down. That's in the Gunfighter series. And you credit me with that title, although I'm not sure why. The third in the series is in the Sundown Riders series called Stagecoach to Hell. So I should have asked you this before. In the Sheriff Mackey series, the 4 books, is there a 5th book kind of percolating about in your wheelhouse, do you think?
Oh, there's a 5th through 50. I mean, there's that series has no end, in my opinion. I have ideas about what to write about when they're older or whatnot. But the way, for anybody who's read The Dark Sunrise, the 4th in the series, you can tell that there is a certain end of one arc of a story, but there is a whole universe of other tales I plan on telling. And also next year, there's going to be a spin-off character that is featured in Dark Territory and Get Out of Town and The Dark Sunrise that a lot of people liked. And this is why feedback is important. Jeremiah Halstead, he is going to have a 2-book series, at least, hopefully more, with Kensington, and those books will be published next year.
Get out of my brain. There's only one room for one person here, Terrence McCAULEY, and it's just me. Because my next question was going to be, when writers write individuals, sometimes don't tell anybody, they may like just as much as their main character. And so, apparently there is going to be a spin-off, which to me, I think that's a great idea. So I mentioned numbers. I think it's time to be blunt. Since 2020, and now I'm going to throw some actual numbers out here. Since 2020, it's 2021, folks, just for those of you brain-addled amongst us, like me. Since 2020, you have had 7 books published. Some authors work at a breakneck speed to put out 1 a year or a year and a half. How the hell have you been able to do this? Do you sleep? Do you eat? And by the way, do you actually still have a day job?
I do not. No, I resigned my day job back in 2020.
That means I like that.
Yeah, it was because the environment was incredibly toxic and hostile and highly political. And I just had, I was 46 years old at the time and said, I deserve to be treated better and I don't need this crap anymore. So I walked away from that. It has not been easy, but I got a supportive family. And I have been writing ever since. Now, it's funny, the productivity had nothing to do with that because a lot of those books were already in the can by the time I walked away.
Okay.
So I was, I've written, I had a lot of them in my head. And usually the way people love talking about this stuff, I have the ideas for the books in my mind. And then they percolate over time. And by the time I actually start to sit down and write, I don't have to get into the mindset. I don't have to try to psych myself up to do it. It's basically a typing job at that point. And I have an idea. I start typing, and then the entire world that I'm creating unfolds on the screen in front of me. And that sounds corny, but that's just about the best way I can think of to describe it. And it's, I learn about the characters as the reader learns about the characters often enough. So that's my literary journey at this point anyway.
I think that's a blessing. I think you've been blessed for a couple of reasons. A couple of very salient reasons to me. Number one, you were able to do, well, unless I'm putting words in your mouth, you were able to do what you wanted to do, and that's to make writing.
I mean, I ultimately, I've got plans for some good news I hope to be able to announce in the coming months, and I'll certainly keep you apprised of that, about how my writing career was going to go in the future. Very soon I'm going to be relaunching my website. I'm going to, because I want to challenge myself as an artist, and that's not getting hyper creative and flying around the room and talking about high art here. It's anybody. I mean, if you're a woodworker, you want to challenge yourself to see if you can't build that kind of cabinet or that kind of deck you didn't think you could. Looking at is the Victorian I'm interested in. Okay. I'm interested, even if I only stay with these 3 genres. I've got plenty of stories in a row. I needed to take a break And I delved back in 1927, and it's tentatively called The Wandering Man. I've got a publisher for it, but I'll talk about that at another time. And you'll find this interesting. It's loosely based on the Albert Fish case. And I'm sure some of your listeners have heard about it. And if you haven't heard about it, it's definitely something to research, because it was a fascinating and horrifying and terrifying case. But it's interesting to know that kind of thing happened in 1927.
Wasn't that New York?